Right. Well, so this is our next Meet the Speakers video, even though it's Thomas and myself, so you've already met us probably, because if you've been to the conference over the last couple of years, obviously you'll know us already. But I think we just thought it'd be a great idea just to have a discussion about what we're going to talk about at the conference and a little bit of background information to it, sort of go off in a tangent, because we've produced the book, Boranger Saunière, Priest, Wizard of Rennes Chateau, and we're going to the premiere of the video is going to be shown at the conference, and we're going to have questions and answers. So you'll realise later on that there's a tangent that takes you off into the pagan period, like a repeat of the pagan period. So we thought what we talk about is this time between paganism that led into the Christian period. So, so Thomas, what I thought I'd ask you is how you saw this pagan period before Christianity reared its head.
Incredibly mysterious, and I still do, because there's so much missing information. I think, remember that time we went to the Isle of Man to make the film, and we were looking at the Norse and the Celtic artwork from that period, and you don't know when the pagan period ended and the Christian period began. And in Ireland, especially, like a long, long time ago, many years ago now, when as a kid even, I couldn't figure out that period. Like I remember looking at the round towers of Ireland and I was saying they make no sense. They're not ecclesiastical architecture. They're in just because they're in so many of them are in church areas or monasteries. I think they were here before. They're often built of different stone, like the one we went down to in County Clare, I think Kilmacdonough, the big one, the big tall one. That's very different stone than what the monastery beside it is made from. And so there was always a period there. And I wondered, the Irish high crosses, they used to tell us when we were kids, well, they show images from the Bible. And I was looking at them and saying, they could show anything. They could be anything. That's just, they're just pictures of figures. And then they would also, I remember the National Museum of Ireland, they basically would show all this incredible artwork. And they would say, oh, it only happened when St. Patrick arrived. Like there was no previous school of artisans and craftspeople that were doing, and also the things like the Ardagh chalice and the so-called bishop's crooks had all dragons and, what they call in Nordic art, the gripping beast. These are not Christians. There's not an element of any Christianity on it. So the period, what is it? It's incredibly mysterious. And it's also a phenomenally fascinating topic that is really, really worth exploring.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at the question I get asked a lot on tours is the gargoyles and the grimaces that you hang down on churches. You say, why do Christian churches have these strange things? And I suppose in a way it's the same as the Green Man and the Shunagigs, that these things were existed before Christianity was there, and it just blended into the beginning of Christianity. So, I mean, this would have been a time when people would have venerated these gods like Pan in the landscape.
Well, one of the popes even wrote letters to the early church in England, and he said, just don't destroy the unclean idols of the Britons that are in the churches, remove them from the churches, but keep the pagan temples intact for our religion because they're well made and well built. So that's one of the kind of like smoking guns of history, is that the papacy, upon the Christianization of Britain, realized that they were, just like with the round towers in Ireland, that these were gathering places of buildings that were very well made. And so no point in destroying them. We'll just adopt them and Christianize them, but we'll take the unclean idols out of them and we'll put them outside. Now, that's the gargoyles, isn't it? Right? Isn't that it? And the ones they couldn't take out, like the Green Man and the Shield and the Gig, they incorporated it in almost nearly always into the church itself.
Yeah, so the people in those days would have. There's a place in Yorkshire called Robin Hood Stride, and it's a great big rocky outcrop right next to a stone circle. So that would have been an early meeting place. And I remember reading in it's one of them, I can't remember which book it was, but he talked about this Robin Hood Stride as a dance. It wasn't. It was actually what they said really is that this is a place where they would have done the Robin Hood dance, like a pagan ritual, in order to, for the crops of wealth.
Well, and there's also a lot of stones in England called the Robin Hood megalith or the Robin Hood menhir. There's one right in Liverpool, very close, John Lennon's house, actually, very close to it. And it's called the Robin Hood Stone now, and it has all these scratch marks in it. Now, that also brings us into the Red Robin thing as well, which was a pagan
Yeah.
ritual that wasn't very nice. But it was, well, maybe it was nice if they were killing a nasty person or something, that they would fertilize the crops with the blood of someone who was being executed. But that's a possibility that comes from that too. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. The Dakar Bears in Cumbria that you introduced me to, well, they were incredibly ancient idols that were obviously found under the church, and they stuck them in the graveyard. And they're just smoking gun right there of how gargoyles came about. They probably just put them
Absolutely,
on the
yeah.
outside, and then he probably, instead of saying your gods are not inside, they're outside. And if you look at the shield in a gig, one of the most famous shield in a gigs is one that's actually in France, in Normandy. It's used on all the cover of the books. The one that's just a big roundy head. That's not actually a shield in a gig. My late friend Jack Roberts, who died recently, pointed out that that's actually a gargoyle. So they took the shield in the
Okay.
gig outside sometime, or they took. This is where the gargoyles were. They were the unclean idols inside the temple, and then they burlesqued them by making them as and as horrible as possible to say to the locals that there's your old gods. They were all monsters.
Right, yeah. So people would have known about all these different strange things that are hanging off church, like the gargoyles and the test. People would have known about these, would they? And they would have been before Christianity, and they would have been part of their daily lives. Do you think, or were they just made up later?
I think there was a long transitional period. I think they were playing the long game. The church definitely they were definitely playing the. You have to understand when you look at this topic, not you, I mean, in general, that you had Christianization in the Roman Empire first. It happened predominantly in places like Syria and Alexandria and in that part of the world, the Middle East. And a lot of it was very violent in terms of how it happened. You had the Christians in the early days were like ISIS on steroids, and they destroyed the temple of Palmyra and they smashed all, the iconoclasts, and they smashed the noses off statues of the ancient gods because they actually believed demons were inside them. And then eventually, through almost becoming like the Scientology of the Roman Empire, Christianity became very fashionable among the elite. It's funny, we're kind of seeing that again here today
Hmm.
with the way the establishment are sort of fascinated with a certain Middle Eastern sect,
Absolutely, yeah.
without going into details, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. And so
Absolutely.
they all became fascinated with Christianity as a kind of Scientology among the Roman establishment. And then Constantine the Great figured out, well, this is a perfect religion for the Roman army. And all he did was he took, because then it will make them not afraid of death, the specific rules, the specific things on dietary stuff. There's all kinds of things. There's you go to heaven when you die, you're guaranteed a place, so we don't have to pay a pension, and this kind of thing. And being a conniving swine that he was, he made it the official religion of the empire, though he did not convert. In fact, on his tombstone in Rome is a memorial. It shows him at the end of his life making a sacrifice at the temple of Lucifer. So he was a pagan
Yeah.
in the end. So he had that first, right? And then you had that Latin Christianity, which was very Jewish in terms of how it happened. One of the first, and then you had like Armenian Christianity, very early Ethiopian. Now, one of the first places it spread to was these islands, particularly Ireland and like the north of England, Lindisfarne, places like that. But that was a very different form of Christianity. It was very similar to the Roman kind that existed. Now, but it didn't last long, and it was very unstable. And this was, if you look at the history of the early church in Ireland, right up to the Saint Malachy, there was this whole thing where it's not happening. We're falling apart. The people constantly keep going back what they call the old faith, the old religion. So what happened then was then you had a sort of like a second kind of wave of Christianity when the Vatican and the Roman Empire penetrated the Christian Roman Empire, what was left of it in the Western Empire, penetrating into Europe, into Central Europe and Germany, and then they adopted Nordic things. In my film, who saved the who stole the Allfather, you can see how they fused the archetype of Odin with Jesus on the cross, the Odin on the axle tree, Jesus on the cross. And you see that in places like the Sandbach crosses in Congleton in Cheshire in England, where they show Jesus as a heroic lord and very different. He's an Odin type, he's a warrior, very different than the image of the Prince of Peace. So it took us a long process of bespoking Christianity into various cultures around Europe until they had it. Until they had like what we have now, and it was basically codified about 1,000 years ago. So for the first 800 years of Christianity, it was all about how can we make this stuff work. And a huge part of that was what we're talking about, changing things, changing. For instance, up in the next time you're in this part of Ireland, I'll take you up to County Mayo, and there's up on just past north of Killala, near Killala, south of it, is near where the round tower is a place called Downpatrick, where St. Patrick was supposed to have a magical battle with the Druids, okay? And there are two magical crosses in the graveyard, and they're shaped like Maltese crosses. And they're not Christian crosses. And it even says on the tourist, plaque on the wall, they're Druidic crosses. So we know from Peter Knight and his work, in his books, everyone except the Christians were using the crucifix. They were using things like a fish or a set of keys or a cockerel. And they only adopted the crucifix because it was being used by pagans because it represented the cardinal points. So this is what makes a subject so fascinating.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose in a way it was a power play by the church, because as the Roman Empire died off, so you're looking like 400s and AD, that sort of thing. That's when they invented the Christian calendar. They backdated it, didn't they? They didn't it wasn't going from day one after Jesus was born. It was always something like year 20 of Caesar this, Caesar that, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they decided, I think, eventually we're going to have to do something here because we're losing our power. We're losing, everything's going. We'll have to, if we adopt this religion, it's like clutching at straws in a way. So they backdated the religion, and then it was a case of, it was a power play. And then we're going to control by, instead of the army and legions, we're controlled by the church. And by God, that's worked, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, even the way they used Mitra, the Persian god, which is a pagan monotheistic religion, was the most popular religion among the Roman military, among the army men in the Roman Empire, in both the Eastern and the Western Empire. And they took that, away and gave them Jesus born on exactly the same day to a virgin. He dies and rises from the dead 3 days later. They just changed the name Mitra to Jesus. I'm not putting down Christians, but if they only knew how made up their religion is, they would, But you can't. I mean, I'm not. What people believe is their own business. I don't care. But it's fascinating, and there's lots of things like that. They took holy feast days. They changed gods and goddesses. You have, Bridget in Ireland was Breed, and this kind of thing. You had, it's just completely endless how many things they borrowed from and made their own by just renaming it.
You can see it so often on every time you go to one of the old churches. It wouldn't have been a bad belief system if it had stayed with the old pagan gods as well as the new teachings. Because a lot of the Christian teachings you have now were invented much later. I mean, even after the Synod of Whitby that was really when I think the Orthodox Catholic Church took over. But before that, I mean, it wasn't such a bad belief system. On the Isle of Man, don't think we went down. It might be too muddy when we went, but there's a place called St Patrick's Chair where there's 3 standing stones with big carved crosses on them, and that's said to be one of the earliest meeting places where people with pagan beliefs would have met there with this new teaching system coming over from Levant or whatever, and hearing and adding it to their pagan beliefs.
Fascinating. Isle of Man is such a fantastic lexicon of this stuff, because you had the north, you had the Vikings in the north, the Gaelics in the south, and then all 3 being fused in the middle. Like, you took me to one little church in the middle of the hills there that was so spooky and ancient. I can't remember what it was, but it was. I felt like I felt like I had gone back to, like, 500 AD. It felt like, there's the type that Waterboys album, A Pagan Place. It didn't feel Christian, even though it was a Christian church. And I think it was called St. Patrick's or something as well, the church.
The Morone Church, the Morone.
Morone, yeah. And it was supposed to be founded by St. Patrick or something like that.
Yeah. They all have that name attached to it, don't they?
Yeah, even the little chapel in Glastonbury was founded St. Patrick's Chapel. He's supposed to have founded that. Another smoking gun are the stave churches in Norway. Those incredible wooden churches that they built in Norway that have the dragons out the side. And in Norwegian folklore, they were built by Scottish and Irish artisans after Ireland had fallen to Christianity, allegedly after St. Patrick's magical fire at Tara. And what we're, the Christians portrayed like Tara as like mud huts and like, shacks and stuff like that. When it was basically the capital of an empire. If the stave churches came from that architecture, it would have looked like Rivendell in Lord of the Rings. But they brought the Christians around. The Christians born. That's what the magical fire was.
That's one thing I really gets me, that when Christians did do this taking over bit, they were in times immensely brutal. They would just murder a whole race of people. And then you come back a couple of 100 years later, and these people are being brutalized, won't hear a word against them.
Yeah.
I can't get that through my head, but it's not really
the history of Christianity was genocide from the initial attack on Palmyra in Syria and the Roman temple, and didn't end until the 1530s with the defeat of the Karelian pagans in the Third Swedish Crusade. Over 1,000 years of genocide is how Europe became Christian.
Yeah, and now people just think, it's so wonderful.
You can't say that to Christians. I mean, I've got a page in my blog that lists just the initial years of the absolute horrors that were inflicted upon pagans in Rome and Greece. And that was just like it's only like 200 years worth, and that was only scratching the surface.
Amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's a fantastic place to move to, the Languedoc, because obviously the Albigensian Crusade, where they burnt thousands of Cathars, just burnt them to death. It's that in itself is mind blowing, isn't it? Very big to,
and they were Christians.
And they were Christians.
And the same with the Reformation.
Absolutely. And then, but what I've kind of realised, sort of fully now, that in the Languedoc, it wasn't just about burning Christians; it was about stealing the land off the Knights Templar who wanted to, because that was going to be their homeland, wasn't it? They decided they were going to live there. They were going to make it their own little country, the Knights Templar country. So they had to, because when you look at the dates, you got the Albigensian Crusade started about 1209, going right through to 1244. Then the Inquisition carried on maybe for another 50 years after. And then when they rounded up the Knights Templar, that was only 1307. It's pretty much straight after, isn't it? It's So they killed all um, the Cathars off, stole all the land with the help of what was it called? Uh, Cameron de Montfort, and then immediately killed off the Knights Templar.
Yeah. And,
It's
and forgot, for the Prince of Peace.
absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
And
you couldn't make this stuff up.
I know it's like, well, I know. There's no telling anybody, is there? But so let's move on to our Beranger Saunière, shall we?
Yep.
Because well, I think the book's been out a while now, and so people know that we decided that what happened to Beranger Saunière when he with his priest that became immensely rich in Rennes Chateau in the Languedoc, that region we were just talking about. He'd kind of, what you said, had reversed this process of paganism to Christianity and just reversing back to paganism again.
It's very interesting. Before we get directly to him, it's very interesting how the church had this conflict for many centuries, that somehow we've lost something when we gave up paganism. And they started to bring many things back into it that had pagan origins. And one of them, and when it was formalized or codified in word, say with Augustine or Origin of Alexandria, there were these debates about like the pagan loss kind of thing. We're missing something, and that was there for many centuries. It even may have led to the split in the church, the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church kind of retained a very strong paganistic feel, and even a Catholic as well. And that's why Temple St. Peter's Temple as church basilica looks like the way it is because it's based on a Roman temple. That's what they would have looked like inside, beautifully ornate. So when Martin Luther was saying the Catholic Church is pagan idolatry, he wasn't really lying. And all the saints and all the pictures of the saints, they were just all to give them back their own gods. So you don't have statues of Apollo and Demeter and this kind of thing. They gave them icons of Saint Patrick and the Holy Mary and the Holy Virgin and Saint Francis of Assisi and so on. So they always knew they lost something. And when we were in the Languedoc and we're staying in Aix-les-Bains, you very much get the impression that the bishops were down there talking to the Kabbalists and to the Cathar, and they were asking them questions about, they wanted to know, they knew they had something that they were lacking. And the church, this is what's in the Vatican archive. People say, what is inside the Vatican archive? It's a huge occult archive. I'm convinced of it. I'm convinced all the stuff that they learned from the Kabbalists and from the Cathars are in there, because they know that within this stuff it's forbidden from the Bible, magic, is they need that too. And
Yeah,
Saunière did it. Saunière did it.
he did, didn't he? Yeah. So, but it wasn't just him as well. There was like other priests around him that were all involved in it, as if it was a thing that was semi-acceptable still in that sort of area.
Well,
Do you think?
it could only be done that period because the Catholic Church in France had lost its power because of the revolution. So in post-revolutionary France,
Mm,
particularly after the Second Republic, it became almost very atheistic. So what he was doing was what the Templars were doing back in 1300s, but the church didn't have the power by the time he was doing his stuff, so he didn't have to worry about being, tortured to death and burned alive.
yeah. And by God, did he? And there was a massive search on, wasn't there, for you saying that the church could see. Well, the church and royalty were kind of, in revolution, were fighting together, weren't they?
Particularly
So
in France.
yeah, because I mean, Sonia got sent to Narbonne as a punishment for giving pro-royalty speeches. So then, and he was tied up with royalty, wasn't he? So it was that thing that they were very much seeking what they'd lost, and I basically that's crux of the matter, isn't it? That's the thing that it was all based on. They were searching for paganism again, something that was.
Well, that's why people like us, not just me and you, but the people who are into our work or the people we follow or the people who are in this scene, that's why they find places like Glastonbury fascinating. They find the Landerer and the Chateau fascinating. They find the Greek islands fascinating. They know that there's something in their past that has been taken from them, and they feel it. Now they're given all kinds of nonsense and distractions like the Magdalene bloodlines and all that nonsense, but they know that's true. That's to bring them back into Christianity, by the way. They they know this that people go to Glastonbury. Yeah, it's there's a big monastery, the ruins of an abbey. There's this Arthurian legend, but they go, but there's something more to it. It's almost like, well, what that feeling that they have, and that feeling you get in places like Glastonbury,
Hmm.
is that feeling of that period of the crossover between Christianity and paganism.
It is definitely. As I was just thinking, yeah, because you do feel it, don't you? You definitely feel it the longer dock, and you get as you drive into Glastonbury. Sometimes you can get that. You call it a cult feeling, but it's a feeling that is very much one you resound with. It's like it's
It's
you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very
You're coming
hauntological.
home.
It's very hauntological in that sense that you have a longing for a place you've never been, but you
Yes,
should be there. So in some part of you should be there.
yeah, you're coming home to a place that you can't remember.
Yeah, Clonmacnoise on the River Shannon definitely has that. You're like,
Absolutely,
I've been,
absolutely.
I'm a part of this. I've been here. What's really going on here? People feel
Yeah,
it
yeah.
there.
In fact, we had this very conversation in that little church
Yeah,
in Clonmacnoise a long
yeah,
time,
and that
time ago.
that place is loaded with mysterious artifacts. Not just the two round towers, but there's also the cross, which is called the cross, which is just basically a stone straight that has all these intricate carvings and looks like it's been under the sea for thousands of years. It's one of the things that got me thinking as a kid about that thing looks like it was under the ocean, and it's been, and got me thinking about Atlantis. There was maybe Atlantis was a real
Yeah,
place.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? When you this Atlantis thing, I just thought it was ridiculous for ages, and then slowly dawns on you, doesn't it? Oh, just a
Yeah,
minute,
because
it does make sense.
there's other artifacts that make sense, you
Mm,
know, that are just, hold on a second, this is what's this now? And that was the one for me was cross at Clonmacnoise in the museum there. I'm like, that shouldn't exist. That
yeah,
just
that's what's
shouldn't
going
exist.
on. Yeah, maybe it was underneath, well, underneath the sea or underneath, just right next to the River Shannon, isn't it? So
Yeah, and
maybe
maybe
it'd been,
the Shannon came in further, maybe the sea came up that far back then.
yeah, absolutely.
'Cause a lot of the
Because
central
it's in the
part of
country
Ireland,
too.
a lot of central part of Ireland is like Holland has been reclaimed and drained.
So paganism, well, it's a fascinating subject, and can I say, well, do you think it's a thing that people are actually learning to connect? See, the problem is, how can I say this? Neo-paganism doesn't seem to be paganism.
Oh, it's absolutely not. It's more Jewish. I'm not putting down Jewish things or anything, but it definitely is. It has saints like, it has what you call it, it has angels that are straight from the Old Testament and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Gabriel, Michael, and people and characters like Lilith. These are not you're pagan at all. And it purports to throw in things like that. It tries to be, well, we know the history of Wicca, don't we? It was invented by Crowley and Gardner as a way to keep people who were too dangerous out of Thelema. And they invented the Wiccan Road. And you mean, even, was her name Doreen Valentine? Years later, she got people did admit to her, no, Crowley invented Wicca. And she had to
yeah.
frantically rewrite it.
And I've visited. I obviously got involved in these sort of organisations years ago, and they didn't seem healthy to me at all. I
No.
thought this is just not right. But when you
The,
look at what paganism actually was, the whole idea of um, just being at one with nature and sort of maybe in early magic, we called it thought forms. You create a thought form. So these are maybe, I don't know if you agree with this, but the old pagans are energy thought forms that
You know, there were people who seemed a lot when I go to see, when I hang out with, when I've been in a company, I'm
mm,
struck by how many of them are walking with walking sticks or
yeah,
disabled, have serious health problems and stuff like that. And it's like, and of course, it's none of your business to go up to someone and say anything. But I think to myself, you're in negative charisma. Your charisma
yeah,
is actually a negative. Like if you're
yes, yeah,
if
yeah,
you're in a magical existence, your charisma improves. You become more charismatic, and yet these people, you wouldn't want to spend more than 10 seconds with them. And
yeah.
I, I've never, it's very strange. And the neo-pagan thing, like the neo-druidic stuff, and then you have the Nordic paganism, which is incredibly churchy, and it's like Lutheranism without Jesus. It's like they go hail instead of amen, and this kind of thing. And you have Tina Kemp wrote a fabulous article on her Substack yesterday, just about this. I think ultimately it comes down to a lack of honesty. I have this argument with people about shamans. I know people come in and say that they do shamanic workings. What do you do? I bang a drum in a field. I said, if you were to encounter a real Native American shaman or a Siberian shaman and a Sam shaman or a Magyar shaman, you would absolutely die of shock if you saw what they do to get into the spirit world. They don't. What you're doing is banging the drum and singing Kumbaya. That's what you're doing by comparison.
Yes, I've become a high priest. Well, did you spend 15 years in a cave meditating? Oh, college last weekends for weekend course. Like it's
I
just
know. That film with Richard Harris, A Man Called Horse, and he's suspended on hooks. That's exactly what they do.
yeah,
They,
yeah,
they,
yeah, yeah.
they would go through extreme pain thresholds to actually, be reborn, basically.
So in a way, it's a sad thing, really, that people seem to be. There's another misdirection. Everything is misdirection, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much of it, and it's such a shame because
I know,
but
but
it's
there's also I knew one woman that I know I shouldn't talk negative about the dead, but I'm not talking. I'm stating facts. She was like a Wiccan priestess here, right? And she was Wiccan this, Wiccan that, and quite arrogant about it and quite dismissive of people. She thought she really was some kind of living goddess or something. Well, she died a few years ago, and guess where they buried her? In a Church of Ireland graveyard.
I know. There's such a lot of arrogance about it, and like you say, they're all. We shouldn't be talking like this, really, but they're all ill, aren't they? And if you
Well,
see so many
uh,
people ill, then and physically not right, then something you're doing is causing this.
and not happy, very little
So
happy.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
A pagan. If you get the impression well, it's not much. The documents that do exist, they are predominantly Roman and Hellenic paganism. And if you read about things like the festival of, the rites of Elusium, these were joyous family
Yeah,
events.
yeah,
Alias, they were fun parties. The liberalias, they were all about the enjoyment of life and the celebration. And when you had a like with Asmodeus being with Saunière at Rennes le Chateau, these were glorious banquets, and Asmodeus was there with you. Bacchus was there with you at the Bacchanalia. Dionysus was there. Anne was there with you when you went for the fields. When you went into the celebrate like in Arcadia. And that's that famous painting by Poussin. And so, and that's all. But none of that exists in Wicca.
no, no, and I suppose Christianity has spent so long making us feel guilty about just enjoying the world.
Yeah.
That to me, the world's a fantastic, amazing place. We go out on the tours in the hills in the mount. I went up stopped in a hotel a couple of days ago on top of the Pyrenees, and it was just to be in the mountains and enjoy it and have a nice meal in the evening, enjoy yourself. But this guilt of Christianity has seeped through to the neo-paganism, and they don't seem to be
Yeah.
able to enjoy their existence.
And the dourness of Lutheranism And Calvinism has made its way into Nordic paganism, where it's all very serious and you know this kind of thing, and even enjoying yourself has got this kind of serious thing about it, you know. And if we, you know, because they're Vikings, they must have been tough and hard. I bet if we went back then, they would have been just like the Greeks and Romans or anyone else, having a party and enjoying what they could. Now, that's interesting what you said about life in the Landrock there, because isn't that what the Cathars said? That, you know, as long as there's good wine and good music, this isn't such a bad price to pay for being alive. And I always thought that was a very pagan attitude they had.
They had the troubadours, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they would go from castle to castle, bringing a party with them.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine the noises. All of a sudden, you'd hear the bang, the bang, the bang, and a bit of whistling and some music going on, and the troubadours are arriving, and all of a sudden, you're in the middle of a massive party.
Well, they invented like kind of the rock show, the rock tour. So the troubadours would tour from town to town, and it'd be like when a circus came to town in the old days. They'd come into the streets playing their music, and instantly cheer everybody up.
Very much a longer dock thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we should be appreciating what we've got on this beautiful planet that we're in, instead of, I mean, that's how when you appreciate something, that's how it grows. If you hate it and are always complaining and fearful about it, that just kills everything off, you know. And
back to Christianity and the Abrahamic religions. Original sin. You are born with sin. Now that's just like what insurance policy for those religions. You were born of sin, and you're going to have to spend the rest of your life with us to get out of that sin and get into the next life.
then you'll enjoy yourself.
Yeah,
And you got to give stuff up. I mean, how many people give things food? I'm going to become a vegetarian. We're going to become a vegan.
yeah.
I'm going to start.
But that all comes out of Lent and penance.
Yeah, it's just stop giving things up. You know,
Or
doing it.
look how we damage our own societies. Now I'm not getting political here, but a little bit. Take up thy bed and give it to the stranger.
Oh,
Well,
God.
you know,
Hey.
we'll leave that out there, and you can take it
Yeah.
wherever you want. Or turn the other cheek. Love thy enemy. That's all designed to make you weak and easy to.
That was exactly what happened. Yeah, and then that came from the Roman takeover as well as power. I mean, the best thing to do if you're going to take over society is to infiltrate it and make it weak in some way
Yeah.
before you do.
Well, in the pagan Roman Empire, it was incredibly diverse and multi-ethnic. There was every single race that existed in Europe and the Middle East was in the Roman army. But the job thing was you were a soldier and that was your job. Your religion was your own business.
Yeah.
The pagans were so tolerant. They didn't care what your religion was once you didn't start an army, you know, and the Christians started an army. That's plenary indulgences, you know, when Catholics pay money to absolve their sins in heaven. That's where do you think carbon taxes came from? But
exactly, yeah.
And also the Abrahamics have always been at war with the cow and the bull because it was the first god of the European people. So you remember Moses is the golden calf, and he found them worshiping the golden calf, and the unclean idol. And so the cow was kind of considered like an unclean idol. And now we have, telling us that cow farts are destroying the planet.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting how those archetypes always come back, isn't it?
Always come through. So speaking of long-term things, do you think that the old pagan gods still exist? Do you think or do you think they fade away as people stop?
Yeah, I don't think they fade away. I think they, that it's like that fantastic 1974 British film Penda's Fen, that they come back to life when you acknowledge their existence, and they're there waiting for you. They're there waiting for you. And all through history, there's been certain characters that have been come kind of like, I'm fascinated by Saint Joan. There's something about her that's very pagan. Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc.
Yeah, very much so. That's a subject I want to dive deeply into at some point in the future. And there's other things. We have the Cathars, and we had things like Rosicrucians, but also we had Theosophy and Steiner and all these people, they were slowly resurrecting the pagan gods through the back door in different ways. They may have been giving them different names, but I absolutely do believe that paganism is the future. But it won't be neo-paganism. It'll be based on natural law.
Yeah.
I could see something like Tolkien's. I could definitely like someone I was referred to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy as the European Bible. And I think there's a lot of truth in something like that. And I think something like folklore and stuff, as become more transhumanist, will become more deeper and more meaningful to people like us. And I think in a kind of a default way, we'll escape into paganism because it is in alignment with natural law.
Yeah, I hope so, because I mean, paganism really is it's a thought, it's a mindset of gratitude, isn't it?
Yeah, and a belief in there's a natural cycle to the universe, and
Mm.
it has an intelligence, and it does balance the books in every way. This kind, no matter what kind of names you give to, whether it's Hinduism or Mithraism or Celtic or Germanic or English paganism, it comes back to that. But I think
Yeah,
it's like you talking about that sense of longing. I get that when I'm in England and I read about Herne the Hunter or things,
mm,
and that's not even pagan. Or when I even watch the Lord of the Rings films, something happens. That's that feeling again comes back, and that's our ancient ancestors talking through us, unlocking these DNA codes. Now, as pagans, our job is not to you know proselytize. We don't convert people, you know.
yeah,
But I think
yeah.
if you live by example, I think that's one of the reasons they went after the Cathars. They were happy Christians and they were a bad example in the rest of them.
You can't allow that, can you? Really, people go around being happy.
They wanted them miserable and afraid of the devil.
So I think things will just take their own process, their own direction now, because I suppose the church has really had its day, hasn't it? It's not. They're still there, but Christianity is not what it used to be, is it? Really?
But it had its day with the Renaissance. It really did, because the Renaissance was really what it was, the return of the classical world. And when they started doing the public works in places like Milan and Rome and pulled out these incredible 2,000 years old statues out of the rivers and stuff, they couldn't believe it, because the Christians had smashed all the other ones. And they couldn't believe they were pulling these things out of like these incredible artworks. And then they realized how much they lost, and overnight, literally overnight, not just in Italy, but all around Europe, particularly in places like Germany and England, you had a massive advance that brought us back to, it really was a renaissance that brought people back to the time of the pagan Roman Empire, because they'd realized we'd lost all this art because of the iconoclasts that destroyed, as in Catherine Nixby says in her book, 70% of the art and science of the pagan world. If it wasn't for those old guys in the Greek symposiums running away from the Christians carrying their scrolls into Persia, we would have never known about Archimedes and Pythagoras and Plato. And you just think about that. And those things, so it's been coming back ever since the Renaissance. This is why universities deal in Latin, they deal in Greek. This is why, because we know that sense of loss, that we lost something when we lost the old pagan gods.
This is like what we do when we go and visit the old stone circles and the old ancient sites. That
Yeah,
that is a grasp hold of this thing that we've lost, isn't it? Really?
yeah, and you even get that feeling. Like I had people say to me, "You get that feeling too at old Christian sites, but they're Christian." And I said, but they weren't Christian originally. They were the
Mm.
energy that was originally there remains. There's a place called Holy Island, again on the River Shannon down towards County Limerick, and there's actually a stone circle with a Roman church built over it, a
Oh
Roman.
yeah, well, yeah, I've seen these things. We go to a place on the New Year to it, a dolmen with a church built over it, and you can still go into the dolmen underneath, and they've made a little chapel inside there as well.
Is that the
And
one in
you
Portugal?
no, that's in Brittany.
Yeah, there's one in
Brittany.
Portugal. Definitely one in Portugal. There's a couple in Sardinia like that.
Yeah, and then when you look at things like the Rudston monolith in
Yeah.
right next to the church, and they couldn't move it because it's so big. it
Yeah.
dwarfs the church. It's so obvious that all these places. I mean, why would you do that unless you could already feel that existed?
The power of its endurance after all these centuries. Could you only imagine how colossal the charge was back in the day? No
Imagine
wonder,
if you had
no
anybody.
wonder they had to spend 1,000 years genociding Europeans in order to remove it.
And they still haven't managed to fully do that.
No, and they never will. And that chap, what's his name, Martin, up in Aberdeenshire, the recumbent
Oh
stone
yeah,
circuit.
Martin Morrison. Yeah,
Yeah, Martin Morrison. The Puritan stone killers tried to destroy all them back in the Puritan times, and they gave up after a while because they realized they could not only could, there was too many of them, but it wasn't destroying the what they called the idolatry in the landscape.
yeah. So they just called them all devil stones
Yeah,
and meant evil.
if they're not giants this or giants that, they're devils this. And in Ireland, and not every odd standing stone is called St. Patrick's this, St. Patrick's that.
Got around a lot, that guy, didn't he?
Oh, but there's an interesting one. He was invented by a anachronite bishop called in Ossory, which is down in County Offaly, called
Oh,
Aid of Slettery was the bishop's name, right? Aid is the Irish god of the underworld. I'll leave you with
oh,
that.
wow! Imagine that.
Yeah,
Right, I suppose we better. I don't know how long we've been chatting, but I think it's been a while.
yeah, nearly an hour. Yeah.
So let's. Only thing to say is the conference. Tell them about the conference. I'm always doing it. You can do it for a change.
Well, the conference, what's it like? My fourth year there now, I think it is now it's held in a very nice, big, spacious hall with a huge screen, with room for everyone in St. Anne's near Blackpool in Lancashire in the north of England. A very easy place to get to from anywhere, Scotland, England, Ireland, you name it. It's got, you're coming from overseas outside these islands. There's Manchester Airport's not far away. And it's a weekend of just really interesting stuff. I mean, that's how I find it. I find it like I always learn things. It's very friendly. There's loads of stalls to buy stuff. And speaking of stalls, I will be there with Sarah Mondaini. We will be releasing the Hocus Pocus book on the day. And it'll be the only chance you'll probably ever get in the history to have both of us sign the book. So that, so to be there if you want that, right? And along with Neil's film, which I've already seen, and I'm a bit jealous because he's done a really good job. Uh,
Yeah,
Maybe not as artistic as I tend to be, which is
not as
probably
good as yours. Let's be
well.
honest.
I'm a bit arty farty, but I have to say when I was finishing watching yours, I was like, Jesus, he really told that story well. So you get to see that, right? And then the questions by me and Neil afterwards, and okay, that's it. That's all I can say. It's a lot of fun, and a lot of interesting stuff to learn, and the book stalls alone are fantastic, as well as all the other things, and always nice people. And the hall has like a lovely coffee shop, cafe in it. And the place, because it's a holiday resort, is surrounded by loads of places to go and eat and hang out and stay. So I think Neil, you should talk about the guests, the speakers.
Yeah, well, okay. Quick rundown on the speakers is well, obviously we're starting off for the first hour or so. To do by memory. There's David Malmberg. Now, David is American. He's coming over just for this, and he's a very famous ventriloquist and Spanish guitar player, and he's really well known in America. I've seen the audiences, and he's got his own records out and all this different stuff. But he's also a member of a pure Masonic group that actually go into the mysteries and learn the mysteries properly. So, and he's an adept as well. So, well, he got a really amazing. He wants to talk about how ventriloquism was part of the early pagan religions, so or at times it was really religion. So that's going to be fascinating. I'm not sure it was.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I don't even know what he's going to say yet, but it's. I think I mean you don't get that anywhere else, do you? That's a one-off, and thank God for he's coming all the way over it.
Is he bringing? Is he going to bring a ventriloquist doll?
I'll ask Johnny. I might ask him to. I know they're traveling a bit. Him and Cheryl is partner, but it,
Otherwise, it'd be a bit like when I went to see Lloyd Pye and he didn't bring the Star Child skull, and someone told me it's like Keith Harris didn't bring Orville.
check it. Yeah, that's right. Hello. Yeah. So what else we got? Well, oh yeah, of course. It's the 20 years of the Da Vinci Code, isn't it? So we've got Lynn Picnic and Clive Prince, the people who were responsible for providing all the information to Dan Brown in the first place about the film and the book. So, I mean, we've got the two stars there, really. I mean, they came 10 years ago for 10-year anniversary, so they've come back. I sent them a picture of the three of us 10 years ago, and I had brown hair and flim. So it was like
Uh,
really weird.
sure, the last since the Rona, we've all aged badly.
Oh, it's been talk about keeping the weight off now, but anyway, that's a different thing. Yeah, well, there's 8 speakers basically, and 9 this is Lynn and Clive. So it's going to be fantastic. Look on the website. That's the main thing. I won't bore you with them all now, but just look at megalithictours.com. Click on Mysterious Earth Conference, and you can get your ticket there. It's obviously filling up, so it's. I mean, it's only a couple of months now, isn't it? It's 8 weeks or something. There's the 7th and 8th. It's over the
Oh,
weekend, the 7th and 8th of September. So now is the time to book.
yeah,
Really,
yeah, it's tight now. That's scary that you told me that because I've got, yeah, oh, yeah, it's like it's funny how time suddenly catches up on you, isn't it? And you're not ready
you know,
for it.
it's July already. Where
I've
did
got
it
to,
go?
I've got to book my ferry ticket then. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, too right. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel that we changed the hotel this year. Um, the Glendower. Last year we stopped in a different hotel. This year we're going to stop in a hotel called the Glendower Hotel. It's also on the seafront like it was last year, but if anyone wants to be in the same place as some of the speakers and Thomas and myself, it's the Glendower Hotel. It's the best Western hotel. It should be really nice. So I think that'll do for now, won't it?
Yeah.
That's
So
the plan.
I'll see us all in September, and I'm sure it'll be fantastic fun. Like it always is.
Certainly can't wait. See you all September. And bye for now.
Goodbye.